It's 9:20. Means it's 4:20 somewhere. So if you got one, spark up. All right. Part 5 of the audiobook, When Will Jesus Bring the Pork Chops? Let's get to it. I already backed it up 10 seconds from where we left off on part 4.
I'm still working on how to get some women to show up. I had no shoes and I felt sorry for myself until I met a man with no feet. I took his shoes. Now I feel better. You know what would have been a smart thing to do in these developing countries that need electricity? To have tried large-scale experiments with alternative energy sources. Solar, wind, geothermal, etc. We could have tested and tried to perfect these technologies on a large scale in places that need it. That would have been smart. That's why we didn't do it. You know what you never see? A really good-looking homeless couple. I always wondered if the Library of Congress provides books in their public toilets to promote reading. I should think they wouldn't want to pass up a captive audience like that. Here is a generic joke. A person goes into a place and says something to another person. The second person says something back to the first person, who listens to that and then says something back to the second person. The thing he says back is really funny. Stick around, folks. China's gonna win it all. True fact. In Moscow, there's a professional entertainer who is described as a Hitler impersonator. Showbiz. Get one now. Everybody has one. They're almost gone. New, super deluxe, jumbo, handy, portable, lightweight, convenient, collapsible, pre-wrapped, easy to use, guaranteed available in all sizes and designer colors. Get one now. Won't rust, tarnish, blister, crack, or peel, but it will cause tumors. I think the safety instructions that airline flight attendants deliver before departure could be greatly improved if they were simply a bit more honest and complete. They should include graphic descriptions, accompanied by animated and live-action video of the devastating physical damage done to the human body during a crash. They should cite examples of various anatomical mutilations. They should also include a detailed description of the damage done to the lungs and skin by fire and smoke inhalation to demonstrate that surviving the impact of the crash alone is not always sufficient. People deserve the truth. Then, how about a more relaxed, breezy pre-flight announcement, done in the cadences of young people? Hi, listen, we'll be leaving soon. Then we're going to fly a while and get there, possibly this afternoon, okay? Later on, we'll chow down, have some brews, and maybe catch a movie, okay? And hey, try not to ring your bell a lot and wake us up, unless something really scary is going on, okay? Thanks. Oh, and by the way, the captain says do that thing with the belts. Ladies and gentlemen, we're leveling off at our cruising altitude. That means the cockpit crew will soon be lighting up and enjoying a few hits of something really nice we picked up in Hawaii. After about 6 hits, they're going to turn off the autopilot, take their hands off the controls, and let the plane do whatever it wants for a couple of minutes. The captain suggests you keep your seatbelts fastened during this period unless you have a strong appetite for blunt trauma. The captain has just turned on the fasten seatbelt sign. He didn't mean to, but the joint he was smoking fell in his lap, and when he jumped up, his head hit the switch. The captain has turned off the seatbelt sign, but he cautions you to stay alert, as sometimes these planes don't work as well as we'd like them to. The captain has just turned the seatbelt sign on again. Of course, he also stuffed a pound of walnuts up his nose, one by one, so you can decide for yourselves what you want to do about the belts. The pilots who give announcements from the cockpit while you're flying vary. They're not all the same. A socially responsible pilot might say, "On your right you will see Las Vegas, where millions of visitors are fleeced out of their hard-earned money each year by huge impersonal hotels originally built by brutal criminal syndicates and now owned by brutal criminal corporations. These large impersonal hotels have no concern for service or quality, but merely wish to generate more gambling activity because the advantage is heavily weighted toward the house. Whores and drugs are available at all hours." Poetic pilot. Off to your right you'll see the Colorado River as it snakes its way carefully through the ancient multicolored walls of the Grand Canyon. echoing mutely the dreams and disappointments of countless generations of red-skinned people who inhabited the great Southwest. Here's an interesting pilot. There's the house where John Gacy lived. If you look carefully in his backyard, you can see the top of the chute where he dropped the bodies of the 26 children he killed. Over on the right, we'll soon be coming up to the gas station where Ted Bundy picked up his 23rd victim. Altogether, he's thought to have killed between 36 and 50 young women, almost all of whom parted their hair in the middle. A political pilot. Most of the farms you see used to belong to small farmers, but their land has been brutally repossessed by the greedy, grasping bankers, only to be bought up by huge agribusiness corporations who poison the land and produce tasteless food. These corporations receive billions of dollars a year from the taxpayers for no good reason, except to enhance their wealth. Here's a pilot with the blues. Ladies and gentlemen, I've been feeling kind of depressed lately, and I think you'll agree. We all share guilt for the world's suffering and deteriorating condition. Sometimes I ask myself, is it all worthwhile? Quite often I give up hope completely and try to think of interesting ways of killing myself that would get my name on television. Then we hear the sounds of a struggle in the cockpit. Ladies and gentlemen, we have just begun our gradual descent into the Indianapolis area, a descent similar in many ways to the gradual slide of the United States from a first-class world leader to an aggressive third-rate debtor nation of overweight slobs, undereducated slob children, and aimless elderly people who can't afford to buy medicine.
Is he wrong? Name the line. I mean, that was nail on the head. Let's go.
Gradual slide of the United States from a first-class world leader to an aggressive third-rate debtor nation of overweight slobs, undereducated slob children, and aimless elderly people who can't afford to buy medicine. The current conditions in Indianapolis: temperature 61 degrees, partly cloudy skies, winds from the southwest, and intense Midwestern boredom. Now listen, I gotta tell you something, and I'm not gonna sugarcoat this because it is what it is, but boy oh boy am I getting tired of this handicap business. Aren't you? Huh? Don't you think this handicap shit has gone far enough? And unlike you folks, normally I would feel sympathy for these people, but the first thing they tell you is they don't want sympathy. You ever hear them say that? I don't want your sympathy. And I say, fine, fuck you, no sympathy. And by the way, if there are any handicapped people hearing this, I'm not talking about you, all right? I'm talking about the other handicapped people, the ones who'll never hear this. So don't get all excited and start rolling around causing trouble in your electric go-kart or whatever the fuck it is. Calm down. I'm on your side. And just to show you my heart's in the right place, I'm going to start out by mentioning a few of the positive things about the handicapped, okay? First of all, the big blue parking spaces. This was a great idea. I think most people would agree those spaces come in mighty handy, which is where the word handicapped came from in the first place. A lot of people don't know that. They're always right near the entrance to the store or the building, and I find that I can get in and out of the place in a hurry and complete my business with a minimum of delay. Another handicap feature I enjoy are the extra-large toilet stalls in public restrooms. Once again, an excellent idea. There's so much room in there to spread out. It's like a gymnasium. I can do some push-ups, work on my kickboxing, try out a few dance steps. Occasionally I bring a picnic lunch. Nothing fancy, just a small salad, a bit of cheese, and perhaps a delicate Bordeaux. I find that once you're locked in there, you can pretty much do what you want. About the only limitations might be common decency and a sensible regard for personal safety. One time I had a few friends over and we played cards all night. The good thing was, when one of the players had to take a shit, he didn't have to drop out of the game for several hands. He simply traded places with the guy who was using the toilet as a chair, and it worked out great. I mention all of this because I want you to know I recognize some of the positive things that have grown out of this unfortunate obsession America has with the handicapped. But on this subject, I also have a few complaints to make. The main one being this business at the airport of letting the handicapped get on the plane early. I don't like the idea of people boarding ahead of me just because they've had a run of bad luck. Doesn't seem fair. I think if a person's had some bad luck, it should apply across the board to all segments of his life. We shouldn't be going around trying to selectively fix people's bad luck. Now, what bothers me most about the process is I'm not sure all of these people are truly handicapped. Some of them don't look that fucked up to me. I think there's a fairly hefty amount of bullshitting going on at the check-in counter. The whole fiasco begins just before the flight with the parade of wheelchairs. And apparently just about anyone can get their hands on one of those airport wheelchairs. You know the ones I mean? The ones the airlines provide. Not a wheelchair some guy brings from home. I don't mind that. I figure if a guy's laid out money for his own wheelchair, he's probably legitimately fucked up. And I don't mind a guy getting ahead of me if he's legitimately fucked up. You know, like if a huge chunk of his head is missing, or he's got a whole caved-in chest, and 2 or 3 of his limbs don't work. Generally, in a case like that, I'm going to give the guy the benefit of the doubt. I say roll his ass down the jetway and let's get the fuck out of town. But to me, some of these airline wheelchair people don't look that fucked up. They just look old. And my guess is they're lazy. A lot of old people are lazy, because somehow when they hit their 80s or 90s, they think it's time to take it easy. Old people aren't spry and full of ginger anymore. Now they're all just lazy. And frankly, I think they're just trying to get a free ride to the gate. But let's get back to the actual process of boarding. As soon as the wheelchair derby is over, the next thing you have to contend with is these people who show up with canes and crutches, what I call the quasi-handicapped. And even though I'm willing to cut the wheelchair people some slack, I'm not so easy on the cane folks. I'm convinced most of these jokers with canes don't really need them. And once again, it's the old people trying to gain sympathy and get to the front of the line. It's obviously a scam. Have you noticed, for instance, how suddenly these canes materialize out of nowhere? One minute everyone at the gate looks perfectly healthy, and the next minute half of them have a limp. And before you know it, there are 20 or 30 people leaning on canes. I'm convinced that somewhere in the airport, which has now become a large mall with airplanes as a side attraction, there must be a little place where you can rent canes. Canes for planes. But you know something? I'm not that upset.
Having worked in an airport, and I had heard of highway robbery, but when you work at a airport, you see fucking airport robbery, and like $4 for like the little bottles of water that if you go to 7-Eleven is like 80 cents. Like, simply because you crossed the gate and they, kind of monopolize having water. However, some airports, or a lot of airports actually, do have filtered water at the, if you bring an empty container through, you can fill it up once you've already gone through. So, keep that in mind. A lot of airports have that feature.
Not really. Because the best part about these handicapped people getting on the plane first is that they have to get off last. Fuck them. They always get off last. While they're still looking for their carry-on bags and rectal thermometers, I'm halfway into town. You see, life has a way of evening things out. As we resume our look at the advance of euphemisms, we have to keep a close eye on the image makers, advertisers, marketers, public relations people. And to repeat an earlier point, it's important to remember that over time, this trend towards softer language has only gotten worse. I don't know when the whole thing started, but I do know that at some point in my life, toilet paper became bathroom tissue. I wasn't consulted on this, didn't get a postcard, didn't get an email, no one bothered to call. It just happened. One day I simply found myself using bathroom tissue. And then, just as my loafers were becoming slip-ons, my sneakers turned into running shoes, and in no time my running shoes became athletic footwear. It was about then that a trip to the department store revealed that my lazy slob uniform of sweatpants and sweatshirt were now located in a section called activewear. The world was changing. I saw second-hand clothing referred to as vintage apparel. I saw toupees advertised as hair appliances, in keeping, I would imagine, with the dental appliances that had long since replaced false teeth. Of course, if you didn't want to wear a hairpiece or a rug, there's a nice old-fashioned term, you could always look around for a good, reliable hair replacement system. Keep an eye out for systems. They're everywhere. The clerk who sold me my answering machine said I was purchasing a voice processing system. A mattress and box spring set is now called a sleep system. And the people who sell mops have not been resting. According to a commercial I saw recently, the Clorox Ready Mop is now America's favorite mopping system. And if you think you can escape these systems by going for a drive, forget it. Your car has been systematically infiltrated too. The heater and air conditioner became the climate control system. Your brakes have been replaced by a braking system, and your seatbelts and airbags are now known as the impact management system. You can't beat the system. Marketers will always strive to make things sound more impressive than they really are. That's why dashboards became instrument panels. And how's this for laying it on thick? A magazine ad recently informed me that the cars depicted were equipped with leather seating surfaces. When you get right down to it, you have to admit, marketing people have a ton of balls. The upgrading continued. At home, I found myself watching animation instead of cartoons. And it turns out all those TV shows I'd seen before were really not reruns. They were encore presentations. At about that time, I noticed that soap operas had begun billing themselves as daytime dramas. Theaters felt overdue for an upgrade too, so they became performing arts centers, or sometimes performance spaces. In keeping with the spirit of certain nightclubs, who now speak of themselves as party spaces. The really hip just call them spaces. While all this was happening in smaller locations, the big arenas decided they wanted to be known as events centers. Center is another word that's become important. Hospitals have long thought of themselves as medical centers, but now libraries have joined the chorus, calling themselves learning resources centers. And just to wrap this section up, and returning to show business for a moment, no matter what size the place where entertainment was being presented, at some point it was decided they would all just be called venues. Systems, facilities, spaces, centers, and venues. They're all words to keep an eye on in today's atmosphere of increasing self-importance. Want some more changes? Profits became earnings. Personnel became human resources. The complaint department became customer relations. People started offering feedback instead of criticism. Car sickness turned into motion discomfort. Messengers became couriers. Junk mail morphed into direct marketing. Special delivery was suddenly priority mail. And after all these years, I picked up the phone and discovered information was identifying itself as directory assistance. I don't even want to mention my dismay at the fact that every old-fashioned shady used car dealer in a plaid jacket was suddenly selling certified pre-owned vehicles. By this time, the dump had become the landfill. I guess it was inevitable. The garbage men who fill it had long since become sanitation engineers. And in some cities, garbage collection was going by the fancy and misleading name Environmental Services. The changes even got me where I lived. According to the Census Bureau, my apartment had become a dwelling unit. And when I asked my janitor to put a peephole in the door, I discovered later that actually the custodial engineer had installed an observation port. One day, a buck-toothed girl told me she had overbite. That was the day I traded in my glasses for prescription eyewear. Of course, some of these language upgrades are more widespread than others. Admittedly, they're not all universal. For instance, we still have motels, but some of them wanted to charge a little more, so they became motor lodges. We also still have house trailers, but if they're for sale and profits are involved, they become motor homes, mobile homes, modular homes, or manufactured housing. So apparently, what we thought all this time was a trailer park is actually a manufactured home community. I guess the lesson is we never quite know what we're dealing with. Could it be that all these years on the Jerry Springer Show, we've actually been watching manufactured home community trash? And I guess you've noticed a trip to the drugstore has changed a lot. The products have all been transformed. To start with, The medicine I used to take is now called medication. I have a hunch medication costs more than medicine. Mouthwashes are dental rinses. Deodorants have been joined on the shelf by antiperspirants, probably because sweat has become nervous wetness. A plain old bar of soap these days is being described variously as a bath bar, a cleansing bar, and a clarifying bar. Can you imagine your mother saying, "Young man, if I hear that word out of you one more time, I'm going to wash your mouth out with a clarifying bar"? Doesn't sound right, does it? The hair people have taken liberties too. Hairspray, too ordinary. Try holding mist. Of course, if you don't want holding mist, you can always turn to shaping mousse or sculpting gel. Anything to get you to pay a little more. Cough drops have grown up and turned into throat lozenges, some even calling themselves pastilles or troches. Guess what? Right, $2 more for lozenges, pastilles, and troches. I can remember in television's early days when constipation was called occasional irregularity. These days, in a kind of minor reverse euphemism trend, we're back to constipation, which parallels the recent TV comeback made by diarrhea. No more lower gastric distress. Diarrhea. Gotta go, gotta go, gotta go, gotta go. The new TV candor, even though you still can't say shit. And by the way, doctors used to claim that constipation could be relieved by eating more roughage. Now they're pushing fiber. I still prefer roughage. If I want fiber, I eat a basket. And hey, lady, advancing age causing vaginal friction? Tell the pharmacist you have a personal dryness problem. I'm sure he has some sort of intimate feminine lubricating solution to recommend. That's the way they describe crotch products now. Even a good old-fashioned douche has turned into a feminine wash. And remember feminine hygiene sprays? Personally, they didn't sound very tasty to me. If they had come in flavors, they might have been more successful. Vaginilla, crotchocolate, labia lime. Just a thought. Anyway, the latest female product I've heard of is protective underwear, which frankly, folks, I don't even want to think about.
Alright. We will cut it right there. Another 20-minute segment. George Carlin, when will Jesus bring the pork chops? I've always loved his euphemisms bits. This one didn't include, because I know in another one he talks about post-traumatic stress disorder, and how it originated as shell shock. But yeah, that was my reaction. Part 6 will be tomorrow. If you like my reaction, go ahead, hit the like button. Leave a comment below. Leave a comment below if you have any suggestions on anything you want me to check out. I always do try to get to requests so long as it's going to be an authentic reaction. I don't want to do, something that I know is popular, but I've already seen it, so it's not authentic. Other than that, y'all have a nice night. Thanks for watching. Stay blazing.